Welcome back to Game Crunch, everyone, keeping up to date with the latest in the video game world. Now today, we've got a couple interesting topics we're going to have to go over. We're going to start with Ubisoft. So I've been talking a lot about Ubisoft lately. I feel like everybody's been talking a lot about Ubisoft lately because, as we all know, they just haven't really been doing that well. Well, with Tencent, they've come up with a bit of an interesting strategy on how they're going to proceed and what this could mean for the future, as it could have some potential to leave some franchises buried. But we'll get into that in just a second. Then, at a recent conference in Japan, one of Nintendo's lawyers, one of the ones that kind of deals more with the emulation side of things, has went into a little bit more detail on what exactly makes emulation legal or illegal. But we'll get into that in just a minute. But of course, if it's your first time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button if you like to stay up to date with the latest in the video game news. If you find any of this information helpful, hit that like button, really helps me out. But let's just get right into today's topics. So first up, let's check out what's going on with Tencent and Ubisoft's founding family, the Guillemot family. According to Bloomberg, the two are reportedly discussing the creation of a brand new entity that could house some of Ubisoft's key assets. What's the goal here? To boost Ubisoft's market value and possibly give Tencent a bigger say in the future of these assets. Ubisoft has been struggling. Remember in 2021 their stock was pretty high? Well, now it's hovering at about 1141 euros from its high in 2021 of about 84.60. That's a pretty staggering drop. So that's been fueled by delays like Assassin's Creed Shadows, then the closure of X-Defiant, and then we had the pretty underwhelming launch like the Star Wars Outlaws launch. So why are they doing this new venture? It's likely a pretty strategic move. So by creating a separate entity, Tencent could invest in Ubisoft's intellectual properties while sidestepping the restrictions on how much direct influence they can have in the main company. But what's unclear as to what happens to Ubisoft's remaining IPs. Will they be left behind or will they get absorbed later? So what do you think? Could this new entity breathe life back into Ubisoft, or is this just a band-aid on a sinking ship? Let me know down below. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a personal story here and a little bit of personal experience that I've seen with stuff like this. So what I think is happening here, what I think they're trying to do is basically trying to rebrand themselves in order to get away from the stigma that has kind of started to come on with a Ubisoft, like the Ubisoft logo, the Ubisoft brand, essentially. They're trying to move away from that. So if they call themselves something else, like Video Game Champions, I don't know, whatever, then it won't be considered Ubisoft anymore. We won't look at it like, that's a Ubisoft game? I'm not playing that. So this is kind of what's happening. In my personal experience, I've seen something like this happen. So years ago, I used to work in the cellular market, and the company that I was working for, they were a third-party provider for one of the bigger companies here in Canada. And basically, the upper management was telling us to do some stuff with customer accounts that essentially we weren't supposed to do. And I kind of pushed back against this and said, hey, they're going to find out, they're going to crack down on you guys, don't do that. Lo and behold, a few months went by. What happened? They cracked down. They basically threatened to shut down the whole dealer company. So what the dealer company had to do was merge with another dealer company in order to kind of save their asses. So this is not the exact same, but a little similar, because I think what's happening here is Ubisoft and Tencent might be making just basically a new entity, as they call it. So it might be a new company where it might house their bigger stuff like Assassin's Creed and Splinter Cell and whatever else, and maybe Star Wars if they have any rights to any of that. And that way, when they release it, it's a new Assassin's Creed, but it's not made by Ubisoft. So you see where that kind of separates them a little bit from the stigma. Gotta be careful with my mic there. I'm getting used to this. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are down below. So let's get into this Nintendo emulation legality. What's all going on with this? Let's get down to the nitty-gritty and figure out what's going on. What can we do? What can't we do with emulation? So Nintendo's senior lawyer Koji Nishira, sorry if I butchered your name, recently broke down what makes emulators illegal during a copyright lecture in Japan. The short answer? It's all about how they're used. Nishira explained that while emulators aren't illegal by default, they cross a line if they copy code from official devices or bypass security measures like encryption. Flash carts for the Nintendo DS, for example, were deemed illegal for imitating games and breaking encryption. Nintendo and 50 other software companies even won a lawsuit against flash cart sellers in Japan. Now, earlier in 2024, if you remember, Nintendo doubled down on its anti-emulator efforts. The Switch emulators Yuzu and Ryujinx were both taken down. Yuzu was hit with a DMCA notice in May, wiping out over 8,500 repositories on GitHub. Then in October, Ryujinx shut down voluntarily after Nintendo approached the developer. Nintendo's message seems pretty clear here. They're not tolerating unauthorized access to their games. But here's the catch. Emulators can have legitimate uses, like preserving games or enabling accessibility. The problem comes when they're linked to piracy or crack security protections. It's a fine line, and Nintendo is not afraid to take the legal action to defend its turf. So this does kind of clear a few things up, but it also leaves kind of some questions unanswered because I'm not 100% sure what they mean by encryption. Like, what encryption on the game? I know that ultimately they've been really just cracking down on, like, the Switch. The Switch is what they're worried about because that is literally cannibalizing their sales for brand new games. Now, when it comes to NES, SNES, stuff like that, they don't care as much. They still crack down on it, but they don't care as much because they're not, currently making money off of it. But I just don't understand the encryption. I think maybe that's where there might be some encryption in some of these newer games, and maybe that's what they used for some of this when they were cracking down against Yuzu, but I don't fully understand. So maybe one of you guys down in the comments can really explain it to me in detail what they kind of mean by encryption. Let us know, and clear this up for me. And that's all I've got for you today, so of course let me know what your thoughts are down below. Did this kind of clear things up for emulation for you? Again, help me kind of clear up the encryption thing. And what do you think is going to happen with Ubisoft? I think they're kind of looking at building a new company and kind of maybe moving some of the IPs over there. That's kind of what I'm gathering from it, but of course let me know what your thoughts are. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Game Crunch. In case you missed yesterday's news, I'm going to put it somewhere over here, and another video you might like over here, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Have a good one.